Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another live show where I answer your automotive questions. Well, today we're going to have another AMA, so we get a few other things thrown in. A few things to start with. First of all, I will be taking the questions from my Google Plus page and the Google Plus event for this video. So if you're looking to get a question answered, you can either go to my website and click on the Google Plus icon, and it should take you to my Google Plus page, and you can find it there, and that's where you post the questions. I cannot see the questions being posted to the YouTube video, therefore I will not be answering those questions. Apologies for that in advance. However, as I often say, the answer's over at EricTheCarGuy.com. I've got an FAQ page there. In fact, many of the questions that I get asked can often be answered just on that page with all the different categories and things that are split up. Also, there's a forum there, so if you can't find anything specifically to your vehicle, you can ask over there. So you have options. Let's see. I do these about every other week. So why don't I start off with, before I start answering the questions, the meetup was last weekend, the 5th annual. So I've been doing this for 5 years now. The 5th annual ETCG meetup happened right here at the shop. It was an amazing event. We had over 300 people this year. Eric O from South Main Auto Repair showed up, so did Scanner Danner, and actually a couple of other YouTubers that I wasn't quite familiar with also showed up. But it was really good to see everybody. With as many people as I had this year, it was literally impossible for me to meet everyone. And well, that sucks, because for me, that's kind of what the meetup is about. However, a lot of people got to connect, have fun out in the parking lot. We had like sort of an impromptu car show. It was just a really good time, but man, we certainly reached capacity this year, so I'm kind of wondering how I'm going to handle that whole thing next year. But shop is clean. I'm breathing a sigh of relief that I was able to get through yet another one. But I just want to extend a thank you to all of those of you that made the trip and came out to see the shop and meet me and hang out for the day. And well, I hope you had a good time. Anyway, I'm going to leave that aside and get to your questions, which is why we're here. So I start at the bottom at the beginning of the show and work my way up. So for future reference, if you have a burning question that you want me to answer, check my social media, because I post about these on the day of the event. I usually do them every other week. However, this one, I'm going to skip the next, well, 2 weeks, and it's actually going to be 3 weeks before the next show. So that'll be August 10th. But anyway, post early, and you're most likely to get your question answered. But towards the end of the show, it's half hour-ish, I jump around. All right, enough, Eric. Stop talking and answer questions. Okay, I'll do that. Roy DIY. Hey, Eric, I'm thinking of buying a 3-ton hydraulic jack. What other things I need to look for when buying one? How long will it last, approximately? How old is yours? And do you need to do maintenance and service on it? Any tips? Thank you for being such an inspiration for DIYs. Well, thank you for that comment. Good question. One that comes up from time to time for me. Honestly, floor jacks are pretty simple machines, so they don't really require a whole lot of maintenance, at least in my experience. I've had floor jacks last years and years. In fact, I have one that I've had for, 15 years maybe, and it's still working. It might leak down a little bit, but the thing about floor jacks is it's just to get you started. Anytime you're going to be working underneath the vehicle, you need to put it on jack stands. So the floor jack is really just there to get you. So in other words, don't lift the vehicle with floor jack only and then get under the vehicle with just the floor jack supporting it. What I often do is I use the floor jack as like a third support. So if you look at some of my older videos in particular, I'll lift the vehicle up, I'll put it on jack stands, I'll lower it down on the jack stands, but I may leave the jack in place with the arm extended and locked off, but it's not supporting the vehicle. It's just, if for whatever reason the jack stands should decide to fail, it has that third support. So as far as what to look for, you look for quality tools always, but I've got to be honest, I think these days they're all made in China. So I think no matter who makes it, I think it comes from over there. Floor jack, like I said, is a really simple device. It's really just a small piston, big piston kind of thing. And I'm sure there's some that are made in the US or whatever, whether or not they're better quality, but then there's that whole thing where, you know, it says made in USA, but it could be made in USA assembled with parts that were manufactured elsewhere. So it's, as far as the quality of the floor jack, I haven't really sought out, you know, a particular floor jack. Whenever I go looking for a floor jack, I look for something that works, that fits my price range, and that's it. Another thing to consider is if you have a low profile vehicle. Some floor jacks are very good at getting into low areas. So that might be something that might be a good feature for you. So really, it's just the features of the jack itself. Match those up to your needs. Some jacks have like a quick up. So where when you do the first pump, it goes up really quickly, but as soon as it makes contact with a vehicle, it slows down and starts raising it. So really, it's just you're paying for extra features. Like I said, for the most part, floor jacks seem to last a pretty long time. Just keep an eye on them, and once again, don't trust them when you're working under the vehicle. Just get them there so you can get the jack stands. So if you're going to buy a floor jack, strongly recommend, if you don't have any, get them with floor jacks. And you know what? I actually bought a kit years ago from Sears that had both the floor jack and the jack stands all in one kit. Maybe that might be a way you want to go. So there's so many options out there for what you might want to do. Devin Gray has, hey Eric, has the 2500 Avalanche Sapphire had a catastrophic accident tonight. I'm very sorry to hear that. I hope you're okay. Sorry, we'll be taking up I will be taking up your advice of purchasing a turbo diesel power truck, but I'm having slight issues. Which engine is most reliable, the inline 6 or V8? Which years makes should I avoid? How do you feel about programmers for them? Okay, first of all, I don't really know enough about those trucks or those engines to really advise you one way or the other in an intelligent way. So I'm not going to go out on a limb with that. And also, people often ask me about which used car is best. You can have the best car, apparently manufactured ever. But if it was owned by somebody that didn't take care of it and didn't maintain it, it gets pretty run down, and it could be quote unquote under the umbrella of being a good vehicle. But if it was never maintained, then it's going to be worn out and have issues. So I always recommend that an inspection be done, particularly by a person who may be well-versed in the brand or type of vehicle that you're considering purchasing. They may be privy to some service bulletins, things like that, that may or may not have been done. They know where to look. They know where the bodies are buried, so to speak. So I always recommend that you have a vehicle checked out by someone that is familiar with that vehicle line, or at the very least a qualified mechanic before you make the purchase. That way you can avoid potentially a costly issue down the road. One thing I forgot to mention about the meetup, I'm wearing meetup remnants. Metal Rescue gave me this cool shirt, and actually some visitors gave me this hat to wear. So if you're wondering about that stuff, I forgot to mention that earlier. I meant to. Now back to questions already in progress. Al Escalante. Al, from Mexico. I own a 2001 Nissan Pathfinder. My AC is acting up. No cold air is blowing through the vents. I can hear and see the clutch engaging, disengaging on the condenser, but no cold air. I refilled the gas 3 months ago, and the air was ice cold. All of a sudden, 2 days ago, it just stopped working. Should I try refilling the gas, or is it best to take it to a shop? Stay dirty, thanks. I've actually had some fans down in Mexico, and they weren't, too pleased with some of the service facilities that were in Mexico. In fact, that's one of the reasons why they were reaching out to me. I can't speak for that personally, but I'm just saying. Anyway, here's the thing, though. AC is one of those kind of things that I just advise the DIY to avoid, because you can get into all kinds of trouble with it. And if you don't know the systems, if you don't know how they're supposed to operate, and you don't have the proper equipment to diagnose it, then you're kind of in a place to where you're really handicapped as far as what your abilities are. About the most a DIYer can do is top it off. Sometimes there can be a diagnosis, but AC is something that can give even seasoned technicians difficulty as far as diagnosis is concerned. So the fact that you topped it off a few days ago and it was working, and now it's not working. Here's the other thing I have. Those off-the-shelf cans of refrigerant that you can buy and people often use to put in their vehicles, they contain other things often besides just the refrigerant. So it's sometimes dye, it's sometimes oil, sometimes sealer. I'm not a fan of sealer in AC systems, because what I have seen is sometimes those additives that are in those AC cans can sometimes act adversely with stuff that's either already in the system or stuff that gets added later. So it's, you really want the inside of your AC system be as pristine as possible. In fact, I've stopped using those cans, and I've just bought a big container of 134. Yeah, it was expensive. It was about $100 for, I think it was like a 30-pound tank. And that was a shop price. I don't know, retail, I don't even know if you'd be able to purchase it. 134 is not the same as R12, and R12 really isn't available anymore. That said, getting back to the whole topping off and something happening, I'm wondering if maybe some of those additives inside the refrigerant acted adversely, because you say that, I know you put condenser down, but I'm assuming you're talking about the compressor, which is what the clutch is attached to. If the compressor is operating and the fans are operating, it should work. And if it's not, maybe it's something inside of your dash. Look and see if you still have condensation dripping out underneath the vehicle when the AC operates. Often you see like a puddle of water forming underneath the vehicle. That's because the condensation on the evaporator is directed outside the vehicle. If you do see that, then there's a good chance the AC is still working, and maybe it's some of the actuators or things inside the dash. There's an HVAC assembly has different passageways that are controlled by these doors that direct airflow either to the vents or to the floor or to the defroster or elsewhere. If some component within that system is not working correctly, it won't direct the airflow where it's supposed to go. And if it's not being directed past the evaporator to cool things down, well, then you could have the problem that you're having there. And a good indication that that might be the case is if you still have condensation under the vehicle, that would indicate that your AC is still working to some degree, and that your airflow wasn't necessarily being directed past it. So maybe that can help. But once again, I could talk for hours on AC, but I go back to, I've written an entire article and put videos and everything with it on my FAQ page that contains a lot of this information, including diagnostic information about doing AC work. So the whole host of HVAC problems are covered there. So good luck. Midnight Mystery. Hello again. 2007 Acura RDX with 181,000 miles. I'm having an intermittent slow cranking issues. Sometimes it starts regularly, then other times it's slow. Usually the times it starts slowly occur several times within a few days. Twice now it has nearly failed to start. I had to give it a little gas to get it to start. I've also been experiencing an occasional rough idle for a short second. I'm assuming that's what you meant there. And it also stalled once from shifting from park to drive. At first I thought the slow starting was caused by a failing alternator, but then the members on an Acura forum directed me to check the starter. I had the starter, alternator, and battery checked at an AutoZone with a free tester that turned up good for everything. Now I'm thinking maybe the engine isn't getting proper fuel or spark, and now I'm thinking that maybe the spark plugs. Also, my battery is new, 9 of 2015. Air filter is also new. This seems to make sense to me. Other than that, okay, it seems to run fine. Congratulations on the new Tech GSR. Thank you for any input. If I misspelled anything, that's because I can't see what I'm typing. My iPhone is giving me trouble again. No worries, man. I can't spell either. And it's not because of an iPhone. Just spelling is just one of those kind of things that eludes me. But anyway, okay, slow cranking. Now you've checked all the quote-unquote usual suspects. Number one on the list being the battery, but also the connections. We didn't mention anything about the connections, because if you have corrosion at the connections at the battery, or if you have one of those aftermarket battery terminals, like somebody cut off the stock terminal and put one of those little metal things in there in its place and there's a bunch of corrosion on it, my number one suspect. In fact, I'd done a video about this very thing, about checking the voltage drop across those connections to see if they're an issue. And I'll put a link to that in the description when everything is all said and done here today. But basically, if there's a voltage drop there between the battery terminal and the connector that goes to the cable that goes to everything else in the vehicle, that could be the issue. As far as your other issues, intermittent voltage or problems with voltage on a newer vehicle, fuel-injected vehicle, none of the systems work correctly if they don't have proper system voltage. So you need to make absolutely certain that the vehicle is able to produce adequate voltage to run all those systems. If not, then you get these rough idles. Sometimes you get these intermittent weird problems. But anytime there's an electrical problem, it starts and stops at the battery. The battery is the alpha and the omega of the electrical system. And if you don't have a good battery, if you don't have a good charging system, then everything else falls in from there. So you need to make sure of that. You had the starter tested, you had the alternator tested, and yeah, they may test good. It's hard to say. It's kind of who's running the tester. They try to make the testers pretty much foolproof, to where you push a button and it says good or bad. And I am familiar with the testers they use at most AutoZones, and that's predominantly what they are. So if they say your battery is good, if they say your alternator is good, if they say your starter is good, I would tend to believe them. However, if you have those battery connection issues that I mentioned, that can cause exactly what you're experiencing. So that's where I would look on that. Soul drinker, or soul drinker, weird. I'm attempting to become a mechanic, so I wondered how and why did you become one? Thanks for your time. Yeah, that's a long, sordid story. Also on my website, on the About page, first of all, I want to wish you luck in that profession, and we need more people getting into it because there seems to be less and less of them, but I'm not surprised because, well, the pay hasn't been so great for a while, and, well, there's a whole host of other things that I cover on my ETCG 1 channel, which you might want to check out. So, how and why did I become one? Well, like any guy with kids at a young age, I needed to provide for my family, and pretty much it was the, well, I got to a point where I wanted a career. I didn't want another job. I mean, I've done fries at Wendy's. I've put chickens on spits at Boston Market. I've made fake trees. I've set up Christmas decorations. I've done a whole host of occupations through my career, painted houses. And, you know, none of them really fit like auto mechanics did for me. But it wasn't my first choice. It was pretty much down on the list. And I really chose it because I could go to an 18-month program and have that career that I wanted on the other side of it. So it was the shortest route to get myself someplace to where I didn't have to like beg for whatever menial job I could get. I actually had a skill set that was of value and that I could use to get a job, a better salary, those type of things. And all those things came to pass. I worked very hard in school, and that's what I advise you do. Just throw yourself at it 100%, because a lot of people, you know, say this school or that school is a bad school. Well, in my experience, you get out what you put into it. So yes, there are good and bad schools out there, but I don't know of any school that's out there where they're trying to be bad. I know they're all trying to be good. Therefore, you need to make the investment yourself. You need to study. You need to practice. And school is a stepping off point. And I think it's a great start. And a lot of schools work you into getting more hands-on experience, which is also great. And that's going to be your ultimate teacher. Experience is your ultimate teacher in this industry. But you got to know what you're looking at. You got to know what you're doing. And especially with modern systems, understanding how they operate, the electronics and all those kind of things, they're going to make you a better diagnostician, which in turn will equate to a better salary for you. So in the end, when you're thinking, well, I don't want to learn this electrical, or I don't want to learn this performance stuff, in the back of your mind, say, hey, it's worth more money to me. And if you're one of those people that can do those types of things, like a Scanner Danner type, and if you can have him for a teacher, awesome. He's got a book. He's got all kinds of videos that are out there. Strongly suggest you check him out because he's amazing with this stuff. Also, South Main Auto Repair, as I mentioned earlier, he's very good at walking through diagnosis of different problems and things like that. But those are the guys, separates the men from the boys. If you want to hang brakes and do tires and all that kind of thing, yeah, you can make some money. You make some pretty good money. It'll wear you out, though, over time, and we'll see where you're at. So either way, no matter what you decide, I wish you the best of luck. As far as me, well, you see how it ended up. So it didn't work out so bad for me. And I hope it's just as good, if not better, for you. So good luck to you. Andrew Mortimer. Hey, Eric, thanks for posting so much helpful information. I look through your video library regularly, as well as referring friends and family to it. Thank you. Here's my question. I am the lead diagnostic tech for a heavy truck dealership branch in Washington State. Currently, the dealership provides a proprietary brand software, Toughbook laptop, and data link connectors for the shop. When the current one expires, self-erasing programmed obsolescence, the company says I will have to buy and pay for my own software, etc. This totals about $8,000. I've worked for various dealerships since 2003, and I've never heard of a dealership diagnostic techs having to buy this stuff. Is this odd, or have I been lucky for the last 13 years? Thanks, Andrew from Washington. You know, that's a pretty screwed up situation, if you ask me, Andrew. All the dealerships where I've worked and heard of, they provide that side of things because, as you mentioned, it's proprietary stuff. It seems odd that they're doing it that way. And obviously, as you said, it comes at considerable expense. So here's how I would handle the situation. I'd first say, well, are you going to give me a raise so that I can pay for this equipment that I now have to buy, that I'm now responsible for? And if they say no to that, I'd be considering my options. It sounds to me like you're a capable tech. You said lead diagnostic tech. And I know when you're in a place and you've been in there a while, you've got your benefits and everything all set up, and you're used to things. But if they're going to throw this kind of curveball at you and not offer you any kind of compensation or anything, they're basically leaving you, hanging you out to dry, it sounds like. I would want something for that. I would want something in return for that. If they're not going to help provide it for me, it's a write-off for them. I don't see why they wouldn't want to make the investment. In fact, I think in some cases, I don't know about trucks, but I know as far as an automotive dealership, if they're an automotive dealership for X brand, well, I can speak specifically for Acura and Honda. In order to be a dealership, you have to have certain tools. In fact, I did a video not long ago on ETCG 1 with Charles Sandville, humble mechanic, and he talked about VW dealerships needing to purchase over $500,000 in special tools just to be certified as a VW dealership. So that's where it seems kind of fishy to me, because at least in the automotive world, you have to have that stuff available to your technicians, or else you can't be considered a dealership. So something's rotten in Denmark here, and I'm not sure exactly what's going on. But protect yourself. I mean, in essence, they're treating you like a subcontractor. In fact, most mechanics are subcontractors. So in a way, even though you're paid a salary and all these other kind of things, you have to buy your own tools. And I'm speaking in the States here. I know some of you watch from, other parts of the world, and things aren't necessarily like that where you are, but at least in the States, as a technician, you're buying your own tools. And in this case, possibly being saddled with buying a whole lot of expensive stuff. Look out for yourself, look after yourself, and maybe you should start looking around at other locations, considering your skill set. I'm hoping that you're able to find a job, and perhaps even a better one than you have now. But yeah, that ain't cool, man. And I'm sorry to hear about it, and I wish you luck. Frank Valdo, 1998 Ford F-150. If I drive close, it'll all be good. But if I drive on the freeway or drive far, about 20 miles, my oil gauge starts going berserk. But if I stop, if I go back it will go back to normal. Do you think the engine is out? Interesting question. Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, your oil pressure gauge starts to go wacky after you drive for a period of time. Yet when you go short distances, that problem is not there. First thing to check is the actual oil pressure. I've done a video about this as far as how you check oil pressure. Basically, you remove the sending unit, you hook up a mechanical gauge, and you check the actual oil pressure, and you see if the needle has a nice, steady, solid reading. If it doesn't, then that's usually a pretty good indication that the engine is worn out, because oil pressure is not created by the oil pump, despite what people seem to think. The oil pump creates a volume of oil. It does not create pressure. It's the resistance to that volume of flow coming out of the oil pump that gives you oil pressure. That resistance is pretty much there because of the tolerances and the clearances between all the different parts of the engine, in particular the main bearings and journals and all those types of things on the bottom end. That's the first place to get the oil. So if you start having oil pressure problems, it's often an indication that those clearances and everything in those bottom end parts have worn out. I'm not just saying that oil pumps can't go bad, but think about it. Oil pump is the first thing to get oil. It always has oil in it. How often do you think something that's constantly lubricated like that is going to wear out unless there's some sort of outside force? Just putting that out there. So for me, oil pump is always at the bottom of the list of things that cause the oil pressure problems. I look to the engine, and as I said, I check it with a mechanical gauge. If I see a fluctuating needle, if I see low oil pressure, something like that, first thing I begin to suspect is the engine itself. And as far as throwing another set of bearings in there, also done a video about rebuilding or replacement. Now, if it's rare and you can't find it anymore, and you're just absolutely in love with it, fine, go ahead and rebuild it. But work with a qualified machinist on this so that you make sure you get everything right, because you can't just slap parts inside of an engine and call it better. It all boils down to thousandths of an inch inside that engine. As I just stated, oil pressure is dependent upon it. So if you don't get those clearances correct, you could end up in the same place that you were, but your wallet will be a heck of a lot lighter on the other side of it. Start with a mechanical gauge and go from there. As I said, I'll put links in the description to these videos to try and help you with that. Jacob Panez. Oh, and by the way, sometimes I forgot to say this at the beginning of the show. Sometimes I screw up people's names. Some people posting questions have even gotten to the point where they're like spelling their names phonetically. And if I mess up your name, I apologize in advance. And Jacob, I apologize now if I'm saying your last name incorrectly. Jacob has a 2007 Chevy Cobalt that whenever it sits with the car idling maybe 30 minutes or so, and then you take off, a big cloud of smoke is released from the tailpipe after that. It's fine. It doesn't use any coolant. It does use a little bit of oil. What is the problem? Well, what you're describing is kind of classic valve seal problem. When you're sitting at idle, your intake vacuum is at its highest, and it can draw, if the valve guides and their valve seals are bad, it can draw oil from the cylinder head past those valve guides and everything, and draw those into the cylinder. You go to accelerate, cylinder pressures go up, and there's maybe a little bit of oil in there, and then you see your big puff of smoke, and you go on. So it could be that. I would check the PCV system to start with. On the 2007 Cobalt, not exactly sure how they're handling it. Newer systems don't necessarily use a valve. Sometimes they just use a series of baffles inside the valve cover. Not familiar with that engine, so I really couldn't say. But a PCV system, if that's not working correctly, can also cause oil consumption problems and something similar to what you're talking about. Whenever I'm dealing with diagnosing anything, I like to start with the simplest stuff first. So look at the PCV system before you start thinking about valve seals and things like that. I have done a video about how to replace valve seals inside the vehicle. You need an air compressor to do it and some other equipment, but it is possible to do. And then you could inspect, look at some of those valve seals. I'll post a link to that in the description if that's the case. But in my experience, okay, valve seals can go bad from time to time, but if the valve seals are bad, my experience is that there's other things inside the engine that are also bad. So you could be looking at other issues as well as, or in addition to what may be going on with the valve seals. But your description almost describes to a T valve seal problems. And once again, I'll put links in the descriptions to videos that may help you sort that out. Scott Duty is going to be doing a clutch job and a 2003 Accord. Should I replace the flywheel or resurface it using the Scotch pad air grinder method I've seen you do in your videos? Also, the service manual says to replace the flywheel bolts. Is this really necessary? In my experience, no. Service manual says to do it. They're not torque to yield, anything like that. In fact, well, the only reason you need to remove the flywheel is to replace the throwout, or not the throwout bearing, the, it's not the release bearing. Geez, come on, Eric. It's pilot bearing. Finally. Too much junk in my head, I guess. All right, pilot bearing is inside the flywheel on Hondas. It's not in the crankshaft. So many times you need to remove it, remove the flywheel to replace it. And many good clutch kits come with a new pilot bearing. If that's the case, you remove the flywheel, you just knock it out with a hammer, knock a new one in with a hammer from the backside, and then reinstall your flywheel. And I believe the torque on those bolts is about 80 foot-pounds. As far as the resurfacing, I've resurfaced countless flywheels just using that angle die grinder method, and I've been just fine. As far as the replacement of it, I don't believe you need to replace it. That's an expense that you can just spare, or you can take it someplace and have it machined, and that would be the ideal situation. I've also done a video about machining flywheels with a brake lathe. Is it possible to do? Yes, it's possible to do, but to be perfectly honest, the best thing to do is a grinding stone, which whenever they machine a flywheel, they use a grinding stone to machine it. Helps get rid of all the hard spots. It is the best way to do it. But can you get by with a brake lathe? I've proved that you can in most cases. But, you know, not many people have access to that or know how to do it. Once again, I'll put the link in the description. But I've been just fine with cleaning up with one of those discs. Now, if it's really bad or you start seeing cracks in the flywheel, definitely get it machined. You'd be amazed at how much stuff can be machined out of a flywheel. It may look really, really bad, but I've machined plows. I've used one of those machines that I just mentioned. And I can say that I've just thrown some really ugly flywheels on there and been able to bring them back, and everything was just fine. So there you go. But as far as needing a new one, no, I don't think you need a new one. As far as the new bolts, I don't think you're going to need the new bolts. I think you can reuse the old ones. So I know I'm going against the service manual on that, but I've done it for years and never had issue. Jason Giruri. Gyri. See, told you people spelled it phonetically. He's been on here before. Do you have hobbies when you're not Eric the Car Guy? Do you go hiking with your wife, etc.? I guess I'm asking, who is Eric when Eric's not Eric the Car Guy? Okay. I don't want to take up everybody's time with this, but as far as exercise, I go to the gym 5 days a week. I may not show it, but that's because of my diet more than anything else. But I'm actually healthier than I look, and I can do a plank for a couple minutes, at least 2 minutes. So I can do that. So underneath this blubber, there are abs of steel. But anyway, aside from that, what do I do? Honestly, not much. I do this a lot. I mean, anybody that does this type of work, YouTube work at this level, and when I say at this level, you know, you're past the 500,000 subscriber mark, that kind of thing, you are busy. You're really busy, and it's hard to find free time. I try to find it when I can, but normally I'm a movie buff. I always was a movie buff. I like video games. So yeah, going to the gym is a good thing for me because a lot of the things I like to do when I'm not Eric the Car Guy are kind of sedentary, and that may not be the best thing. But you know, I like camping. I like fishing. I like a lot of things that I just haven't done. I played guitar for a while. I was an artist before I became a mechanic. You know, I've done a lot of things, and I like to do a lot of things, but normally I just like spending time with my family these days. And it seems lame to say, but I mean, I'm going every day for, you know, 12 hours a day, pretty much, whether I'm working here at the shop or working in the office, one way or the other. There's, you know, sort of a back and forth between the two of them. So really when I'm done, I'm done. And as far as time off, I get a few hours on Sunday. I work Sunday mornings. Try to wrap some things up, and Sunday after that, you know, after like 10 a.m. or so is like my time off. And as I said, I like to spend it with my family. So, you know, I just like being around them. I've got a really great family. My wife's great. My kids are great. I like hanging out with them. So for me, that's it. And I'm okay with that. So yeah. I hope that answers your question. I know it's kind of a lame answer, but like I said, I didn't want to talk about me too much. Anyway, Sarah C. I've seen a few other folks in videos from the meetup. Noticed Scanner Danner and SMA leave you some souvenirs. Yes, they did. It was pretty cool. In fact, I'm going to post a video that I just got from South Main Auto just this afternoon that he did of his meetup experience that I'm going to share with you guys. And what the heck, I'll post it in the description here as well. But so they left me some souvenirs. My question is, have you found anything particularly strange left behind from one of the events or noticed anything significant missing? Actually, in the 5 years that I've been doing this, I've never noticed anything coming up missing. And I'm very grateful for that. The people that come to the meetup are awesome. I mean, they just seem to be awesome, good people. Aside from a little bit of trash that gets left around, that's to be expected. I had over 300 people here. I spent yesterday pretty much cleaning up the shop, and it wasn't that bad. You know, considering the amount of people were here, considering, you know, we had food and all this other stuff, you know, it was really the mess that I had of the empty boxes from the stuff that I gave away. So far, I haven't noticed anything missing. And as far as things that are left behind, well, last year, Humble Mechanic left me a few stickers that are on my lift. And this year, both Scanner Danner and South Main Auto left me an autographed picture sitting over by my toolbox, and South Main stuck one of his stickers up above my toolbox. I think that's awesome. I'm gonna leave those things there. Those are nice reminders to me that those people were here. So they've left things, and some people bring me things when they come to the meetup, which is unnecessary. I like to give them. I figure they made the trip. You know, I owe them, and I wouldn't be doing this without them. So I feel that way. So whenever they bring me things, it always feels a little bit awkward because I'm like, man, you know, you've already given me so much. Now you're bringing me more stuff. But I graciously accept these things. And as you can see, I wear them. So, yeah. Jonathan Atkinson in Illinois. Love the show. Has a 2000 Honda Accord, 240,000 miles in strong. Have an AC question. I hear what sounds like the hiss of a soda can every few minutes when the AC is on. It's blowing cold, but not ice cold. I can see condensation blowing from the vents once in a while. Any concerns, things I should look into? Thanks for your help. If it's not cooling as good as it used to, you might want to do an AC performance test. Yep, Eric the Car Guy's done a video on an AC performance test just to see where it's at. It might just be a low charge. The sound that you're hearing is the equalization of pressure after the compressor shuts off. So the compressor runs for a while and builds up pressure in the system, and when it shuts off, that pressure tends to equalize, and that hissing noise you hear is the pressure equalizing past the expansion valve on the evaporator inside the dash. Totally normal. But the fact that it's not cooling as good as it should might be a little bit low on a charge. The way to check that, once again, as I said, there's an AC performance video that I'll put a link to in the description. And by the way, you're going to have to give me a few minutes to get those links and everything together after this all concludes. It won't happen instantaneously, but I'll do my best to get that stuff up there as quickly as possible. Anyhow, I go and check the pressures and see what they look like. I like to see my high side pressures on a fully charged system on an 80-degree day with moderate humidity, somewhere around 200 psi. I like to look at the high side. Low side can actually stay pretty constant, sort of, you know, around the 20, 30-ish range, sometimes 40. But the high side and the difference between the two, that's how AC works. If you've got high pressure going to low pressure, that's when it's working. So I like to look at the high side actually when I'm doing my charging. And unfortunately, those cans that you get, like the auto parts store, only come with the low side fitting, so you're only able to look at the low side. So you're not able to see the complete picture of what's happening with the system. So it might be slightly low on a charge. You know, it's a long way of answering that question, but it sounds like it might be a little bit low on a charge. So you might want to take it somewhere and have them do that. And as I mentioned earlier, some of those cans that you buy at the auto parts store have stuff in them. Some of them, and it's so hard to say this though. I just prefer straight refrigerant over any kind of additives, especially sealant. I'm not a fan of sealant in AC. The whole AC system works on the principle of going from high to low pressure. And that the way they do that is they pass the refrigerant through a very small orifice. You know, doesn't matter what's expansion valve or orifice tube or something like that, they're passing it through a very small orifice. So if you've got gunk inside the system and the system is dependent upon a very small orifice, you see what I'm getting at here? All right, well, good luck with your AC. And you've got another question. Is it safe to make the radiator fan clutch to make it permanent so that the fan will turn with the engine all the time? You know what? Why? I mean, they designed it to work a certain way. If it's not working, modifying it to do something that it should be doing is not fixing it. You're just masking an existing problem. So can you do it? Yeah, I'm sure you could. Should you do it? Probably not. If you've got an overheating problem, deal with the overheat problem. Don't like try to mask it up by doing that, because the reason why you have a clutch fan is because the fuel economy. If the fan runs all the time like it did on my Fairmont when I first got it, it had a solid fan on that straight six engine. If it runs all the time, it actually costs you horsepower. So you're actually robbing the engine power by spinning that fan. That's the reason why they put the clutch fan on there. So if you want it to work properly, fix the problem. Don't try to mask it by rigging it up to do something it's not intended to do. Jake Austin. Hey Eric, thank you so much. 87 Toyota truck. I fixed the brake issue I asked you about back in Hangout number 12. This is Hangout number 70. I don't remember that. I'm still working on the engine hesitation problem for a couple of Hangouts ago. Other than those problems, the truck is still like new. Anyway, today I want to ask about my 2003 Honda Civic about 5 years ago. 2 of the dash climate control lights went out, AC and hazards. And about a year ago, the heater dial light went out. Just thought the bulbs had burned out, but occasionally I noticed the hazard and heater dial lights come back to life for a few minutes. This sounds like a loose or weak connection to me. The same thing has happened with another family member's 2003 Civic also. I was wondering if this is a common problem for Civics of this generation, or should I try to track down the problem with a multimeter, or could I not make it to, I could not make it to the meetup, but it looked very busy. Keep up the great work and good luck with your Fairmont. Well, thank you for that. You know, I have the same problem on my Element, which has a similar climate control set up to that Civic. In fact, my Element's 2004, and I just tap on it, it comes back on. Pretty sure it's just the filaments inside the bulbs is all it is. I know and people often do this with electrical problems. They want to complicate it. Don't complicate it. First thing to look at is the bulbs, because that is the most likely problem with the system. So I mean, if you're really into it, forget the multimeter and all that stuff, other than to check maybe the continuity of the bulbs when you take them out. But in my experience, it's quite often the bulbs. In fact, that's what it is in my Element. And the fact that I can tap it and it comes back on, that's good enough for me for now. I don't feel like taking the dash apart. Michael Pelly. Hey, Eric, I have a project 1993 GSR. I know you have 2000. It's actually 2001. So it's right up your alley. The alignment on my car keeps going out, resulting in choppy tires. I think a fix will be to replace all the front and rear bushings with polyurethane. Also, my car is lowered, so there's a lot of noise, squeaks and clunks when I go over bumps, uneven road. I'm thinking the bushing kit will also fix this. Am I on the right track? I should also add this before I forget. My motor is a B17A1, has a Skunk 2 Pro intake, a 70mm throttle body, and a full 1.75-inch exhaust with 421 headers and straight-through MagnaFlow muffler. This burns a lot of oil. I can see blue behind me between 6,000 and 8,200 RPMs. Is it simply piston rings? I already overhauled the cylinder head. I had no idea I should have done the bottom end at the same time. Car just hit 270,000 kilometers. Okay, Michael. I'm not going to be judgmental here. I don't want to be judgmental here because I know you're having fun with the car and I know you're enjoying it. But like people often tell me, you're doing it wrong. No, that's a bit harsh, and I don't mean to do that to you. But I've seen a lot of Integras in the shape that you're talking about, and I'm always, to be perfectly honest, a little bit disappointed to see them. That's why I'm so happy to have my untouched GSR that I have. All right, first off, Hondas are very particular about the tires you use on them. If you don't use the right tires on the Honda, which normally are Michelin's, but in your case, you're out somewhere else. It's lowered, it's probably got different wheels on it and all that kind of thing, but first and foremost, because of the suspension design of the Honda that you're talking about, double wishbone suspension, extreme angle camber changes, whenever you go around corners, that kind of thing, you're going to have tire problems if you don't use the right tires. Second, you lowered the vehicle. Made no mention of camber correction kit. If you're going to lower a vehicle, you're going to change the camber. And I've done a video about alignments. I'll put that in the description as well. But as you lower the vehicle, the top of the tire tends to come in. Therefore, the inside edge of that tire will have a tendency to wear more because of that. The way to fix this is the camber correction kit. So in other words, it's adjustable upper control arms that allow you to bring the top of the tires out so that you can properly align the vehicle. So no camber correction kit, you're doing this, slammed on its nuts. Sure, it looks cool, but you're going to kill your tires. As far as polyurethane making the ride better, absolutely not. Just the opposite. I mean, you think it rides like a shopping cart now? Put stiff bushings like polyurethane bushings in it, and you'll have more of the same. And in fact, you may kill the handling by doing that because you need some compliance in the suspension for it to work properly. So you got a lot of things that are working against you here, and take a good long look at what you're doing. Now, as far as the engine goes, the fact that you're getting on it and you're seeing blue smoke, that's piston rings, just like you suspect. But it's probably not just the piston rings. Probably the cylinder walls are also worn out. I mean, you're talking about some miles on this. So in other words, the way to fix this, depending upon if it's been bored out or anything in the past, if it hasn't, then you could be in luck. You could take it to a machine shop, bored out, larger pistons, better piston rings, or piston rings to match, that kind of thing. That should cure the oil burning problem. However, if it's been bored out so much that it can't be opened up anymore, then you have to replace the sleeves inside the cylinder block, and that gets expensive. And you ask yourself, is that worth it? So you've got some expensive problems here, and that's why I say, you know, it just depends on how you want to approach it, how you feel about the car and everything else. But you know, you're looking at an engine rebuild, a complete suspension overhaul, new tires, that kind of thing. Save your money on those poly bushings because I don't think those are going to help you. But go around the suspension, make sure everything's tight, make sure everything's the way it's supposed to be. But I've ridden in a few cars like the one you have, and yeah, it wasn't for me. But I wish you luck. All right, now we get to the point where I get all random like, and see if I can grab some most recent postings. Jason Whipple, hey Eric, I just noticed I don't see the Fairmont on the lift. Did you push it outside, or do you have another big secret up your sleeve? No. In fact, it's back in the back there. Let me see if I can show it to you here. Yeah, it's back there. Where are you? No, yeah, it's actually back behind the Acura. You can barely see it behind the Element there. But yeah, it's back there. I'm going to be using the lift tomorrow. I got to do some other work. So I put it on my Merrick dollies and shoved it over there. But it almost looks like I've got some batteries about to die in my microphones as well. So I'm going to get back to answering those questions. But no other tricks up my sleeve. All right, let's do another one here. Live It Up has a 1996 Toyota Camry, and it's not as peppy as my sister's. What can I do to make it more peppy? And it is a 2.2 liter. It depends on a few things. Start with just a general tune-up and use the correct parts, And I believe that takes NGK spark plugs or nip and denso plugs. It's really kind of important on modern vehicles to use the plugs they came with or that's recommended by the manufacturer, because sometimes when you go outside of that, it doesn't work so well. So keep that in mind. That's why your air filter, just basic tune-up stuff is what I'd start with. Being a 96, probably not a bad idea to check the timing belt, possibly replace it if it hasn't been replaced in a while. On that particular engine, I like to replace the tensioners in addition to, so you can often get a kit that comes with the timing belt, the water pump, and all the little stuff inside that goes along with that, those idler pulleys and things like that. So that's what you might want to do. That can actually go a long way towards making it run better. So just start it with general tune-up stuff. Don't get fancy. Just do that. Let's see. Let's do a couple more before my battery's about to die. H. I like taking showers. H. Felice Ismail, small question. What is the main difference between a locker and a posi rear end? Interesting question. Posi rear end uses some sort of clutch system to activate. So in other words, there's still some slippage. So, but a locker actually locks the differential into place. So it's a whole different animal. It's a lot more expensive and usually used in drag racing or off-roading when you want to positively lock those wheels. The limited posi rear end or posi traction or traction lock in the case of Ford, those are all things that are designed to have a certain amount of slip at certain times. So, but a locker is something that locks things into place. But that's a really good question. All right, battery light's still flashing. All right. PAX GREN50. Eric, I had thoughts of opening a mechanic shop and employing a full-time mechanic. I've been told by many people there's no money in this business anymore because the dealers are the ones milking this business for every penny. Do you think this is true? Well, first of all, if you're not familiar with the automotive business, I don't advise you getting into a business that you don't know much about and relying on somebody else to do all your work for you. Most people that start their own shops do exactly that. They're out there starting their own shops. They're doing the work. They're getting to know their customers and that type of thing. But for anybody like that asked me that question, in fact, I've done a video about this. I sat down with somebody who teaches a big business class about running your own shop. And we were both in agreement that, you know, working in the field for a while, getting a feel for it before you actually dive in and do this, that's one thing. As far as the industry in general, now, yes, things are becoming more and more proprietary. I've done videos about this on my ETCG1 channel. That seems to be the trend, even to the point where they're talking about making their software proprietary and putting copyrights on it and making it so that you can't go in and do any alterations or anything like that. So yes, it does seem like the automotive industry or the automotive manufacturers are moving towards a place to where they're the ones in control of everything. Whether or not that affects you and your bottom line as a shop owner, that really depends on your business acumen, if I'm honest. I mean, there are plenty of ways to make money in the automotive industry. It's not just repair. There's, you know, maybe minor repairs, maybe just do service work, maybe you work on one particular type of vehicle. In fact, I recommend that. I recommend sticking with like specializing in like German cars, Japanese cars, European cars, something like that. I think that's a benefit to you because your parts connections, your technicians are staying focused on one type of vehicle, one brand or something of that nature. And I think that's helpful because if you're trying to work on everything these days, I think it gets even more expensive when you're starting to think about all the special tools and things involved with doing that. So yes, that can create its own set of issues. So it's not impossible, but it's definitely something you need to think about if you're looking to open your own shop, because it's got its own set of challenges. You know, just doing repairs in and of themselves. If you've watched any number of my videos, I'm sure you've seen that, you know, even myself, someone who's been working as a technician for 20-some years now, struggles. We all struggle, but it's how you get through those things, and the fact that you do get those through those things makes you better in the end. So there's a lot involved. But then add the business part on top of that and having to keep the books and all that kind of stuff straight, well, that can be even more challenging. Well, knowing that the battery on my microphone is going to die any minute, I'm going to close this out here. Once again, if you are posting questions to the YouTube video, I cannot see those questions, so I apologize for not answering those. But EricTheCarGuy.com. I'll put a link to that in the description along with links to the videos and things I've discussed, but give me a few minutes to put that stuff together. I'll put links to those FAQs so that you can go directly to those down there. So tons of stuff in the description. So please check there if you have additional questions. As I mentioned earlier, next show is not going to be in 2 weeks. It'll actually be in 3 weeks. I believe that's August 10th. I'll also make certain of that and post that in the description for you as well. I want to thank once again everybody that came out to the meetup. I really appreciate the fact that you made the trip, hung out with me for the day. It was a pleasure meeting all of you. It was just great. And thanks to South Main Auto Repair and Scanner Danner and the rest of you that came out. Sorry, I'm not as familiar with you, but I'm going to check out your channels. Anyway, if you wish to connect with me socially, there's Google+, obviously, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I close each of my videos with, be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.